I have a lot of good things to say about this movie, but my goodness, Hollywood loves to recycle the same actors over and over again. Hello, everyone. My name is Max Aaron James. This is a review of the movie Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve, a French Canadian director and writer, and he co writes along John Spates here. Dune Part 2 is a continuation of this sci fi opera, this incredibly well written saga that is very white, but there is a logical reason behind it. This movie is based off the novel Dune, written in 1965, a sci fi epic by Frank Herbert. People would argue it is the primary inspiration and clearly an influence of Star Wars, which came out just a couple years later. George Lucas shows this obvious influence with the desert planets, the spice, the themes and discussing the ideas on government, imperialism, etc. In 1984, we did get the first film adaptation that is not very good. It's pretty silly, but it did have its cult following, and that cult following only grew after the 2021 release of Dune Part 1. Villeneuve, admittedly, is in my top directors list at the moment. He's pretty consistent with the type of movies he makes. Great cinematography, great directing, and pretty good adaptation here with Dune. I first learned about Villeneuve with Prisoners, which I do enjoy. He did Enemy, I'm not familiar with it, but afterwards he did Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, which was my favorite movie of 2017. Then you have 2021's Dune Part 1, and now we have Dune Part 2. I think he's incredible. He has a great eye for things, and I do appreciate that he does try his best to avoid putting too much unnecessary dialogue, or sometimes avoids dialogue entirely to focus on the visuals and, the rule of show, do not tell. When it comes to Dune, the story, the theme, I am very interested in it. The imperialism, the white savior complex, the idea of power and entitlement and the desire for wanting more power. Too much power is never enough power, especially when it's presented to you. The sound design is exceptional. Directing is great. Villeneuve does what he does best. Cinematography is really good, although there is a relatively narrow color palette. So if you are looking for a lot of colors, a lot of vibrant colors even, you will be disappointed here, but it still looks really good. Even with this movie being, I think, 2 hours and 45 minutes around that space, it still felt like this was a 3+ hour movie smashed into this 2 hour, 45-minute film, because it felt like there was so much to be given to us, and the pace still felt much faster than the first movie. And I wonder if they were trying to make up for the lack of action that a lot of people critique the first movie for. Personally, I like the pacing in the first one. I think it did great at world building, presenting me to the characters. I thought the characters are very interesting. And I liked everything. Here, there is a lot more action that's actually happening. They're not visions. I do appreciate that Spites and Villeneuve really took their time with developing the story. This world feels very full without being bloated. At no point did I feel that the story was being rushed to get to where they needed to be. There is so much backstory and so much life that feels real beyond just what we're presented for every character here. So Herbert really thought out this world, thought out the backstory and the origins and the mythology and legend of these characters. And at no point did it feel that I was wondering and having to make up what went beyond these characters, or I felt that their story started and ended here with what story we were given. Unlike Star Wars, which feels very much that the stories that are told to us are all that is interesting or compelling about this particular character's experience or their life, and there's not much before or beyond that. And so whenever they try to expand on that, which Disney tries desperately to do, we end up with a lot of mediocrity. Timothée Chalamet as our lead, I think he's a good actor, but it feels like he's not trying anymore. He just does not care. And Hollywood loves to recycle their people. Zendaya seems like the new Zoe Saldana as the token racially ambiguous woman of color now. She's in all movies that could be given to a person of color, but she seems to be the only one that people are going to. None of the other performances stood out. I do not know why Anya Taylor-Joy had to be here. There was no reason. There's nothing amazing about that 3 to 10 seconds of her face showing. Javier Bardem, Austin Butler. Actually, Austin Butler is probably, I don't know if it's his character or his performance, but I was actually interested in seeing him on screen. And somehow Dave Bautista's performance was much more interesting or compelling than anyone else's. So I'm not sure if Paul is boring or Chalamet just didn't put effort into giving a compelling performance. And honestly, with the new characters in this movie that were not in part one, they could have gotten unknowns. They could have gotten new actors, given them opportunities to get in something big. This is a blockbuster with a already audience attracting lead cast, a big director, a blockbuster that is following up a different blockbuster that people already love. So this movie was going to make money no matter what. So they could have brought in some unknowns. As much as I enjoy this overall story, part one and part two together, it did feel a bit underwhelming when we got to the climactic ending. And I want to put quotes around climactic. Because when we finally get there, I was thinking, oh, we're here now. Maybe because Villeneuve plans on or wants to do a third film to close out his trilogy, this felt more so like a setup for a final film, that the ending felt underwhelming and it did not hit as strongly as I think the first one did. However, the hand-to-hand combat is great, so the final battle, the one-on-one fight at the end, loved it, was really good. Again, sound design just amplifies everything. The visuals amplified everything. So you have all this with the story alone. This movie kind of reminded me of Mad Max Fury Road with how invigorating George Miller was able to make that experience in theaters. I still have to let this movie settle a bit to really process how I feel about it, but overall, I think it's a good movie. I had a really good experience. I like the visuals. I think if you have the means to watch it in theaters, you probably should. IMAX, Dolby, any other premium screening. It's pretty good. I really hope y'all get what is being told here and understand the themes. Imperialism, using faith to colonize and manipulate people, propaganda to gain more power, imperialism and entitlement with power, white savior complex, marrying within certain families to maintain and even gain more credibility. There's so much presented here that Herbert explored and took his time with crafting this world that at no point did it feel like things were just tossed into the air just because. It felt every element had a purpose here. And again, there was a world beyond what we were seeing. Until next time, y'all take care of each other, check up on one another, make sure you check up on yourself, and remember, potential has no limit.